development. Second of all, to talk about why we should be interested in e-commerce as a subsector of the industry, as Bayelsa State is. And just tell you a little bit about what the federal government is doing as regards to catalyzing this very important sector. And as this is an investment forum, I would also like to talk about what kind of investments Bayelsa State should be making or seeking to attract to take advantage of the opportunities in the ICT industry. Next slide, please. So with the rebasing of our GDP, the services sector now contributes about 56% to GDP. This is a revelation for this country. What is more interesting for us today is that the ICT sector is the second largest contributor in the services sector, contributing about 17% to GDP. But it would actually be bigger than that when you look at, like I said earlier, ICT actually facilitates the growth of the financial and insurance sector, the education sector, public administration. So the contribution of ICTs to GDP is actually much more than the 17%, services sector is much more than the 17% that you see. Now, when the ministry was created by President Goodluck Jonathan in 2011, we did an assessment, next slide, we did an assessment of the industry, and this is what the industry looked like. You may not be able to see everything, but it basically is a representation of the relative size and growth prospects of the subsectors of the industry. And what you can see there, and we've used a traffic light symbol, red means low growth, amber means medium growth, and the green means high growth. And what you can see, even though you can't read all of this slide, is that the prospects for the growth of this industry are very high because there are a lot of greens and ambers. Secondly, you will see that the network operators and the telecoms industry dominates with good reason as well, because somebody just said that we had very successful mobile phone revelation, over 100 million subscribers in the country today and growing, and so that it does dominate with good reason. But the more important thing is that there are great opportunities for growth, for job creation, for wealth creation in almost every single subsector of the ICT industry. What you will see here on the next slide is what we expect the ICT industry to look like circa 2016, 2017. And what you will see there is an industry that is much more balanced. The size of the subsectors are very similar. And what is also important to notice here, if you can see the circle, what I've circled in that slide, is the value-added services. What we've shown here are the local companies that are making great strides in this industry. The value-added services, which is where the e-commerce sector is actually situated, you see there are many, many young Nigerians making great strides, developing great businesses, making good money, servicing or providing services to many Nigerians as a result of the growth of this sector. So what we're looking at 2016, 2017 is an industry that is less fragmented. There are many more local players and also it's a more balanced industry without any one sector dominating the other. The ICT ecosystem is one that is a source of tremendous opportunities. And really that's why when you're talking about youth employment, it is one that is tremendously attractive and also very easy to attract young people into developing businesses in this particular industry. The ICT ecosystem or the industry is one that encourages and rewards innovation, and without innovation, a country cannot grow. It is one that it is quite easy to increase the percentage of local content. We always talk about local content. Bayelsa is the state of trying to build. I know the Office of Nigeria Content is situated in Bayelsa in the oil and gas industry. We now have an Office of Nigeria Content situated in Abuja, maybe in Lagos or anywhere in Nigeria, but basically trying to encourage the growth of local companies because this is an industry that is growing so fast, tremendous opportunities, and we need to ensure that our local entrepreneurs are benefiting from this growth as well. It's an industry that can actually increase the percentage of domestic value add, whether it is software, hardware assembly, devices, whatever it is. It's an industry that can increase the domestic value add. And it is one, as we said, that has a great demand for skills, varying skills, low-end skills, medium-end skills, high-end skills. And of course, once you have skills, you can create jobs and you can create wealth. If you look specifically at the e-commerce industry, I want to introduce you to what is now called the IGDP, that's the internet GDP, and that's how you calculate the contribution of the internet to a country's GDP. And this is a new indicator that was developed by McKinsey, And it just begins to show you how important the internet is if we're not bothering to calculate the contribution of the internet to a country's GDP. Now you look at the 4 African countries. Out of these African countries, you will see that Nigeria has 0.8% IGDP as a percentage of GDP. Now this seems very low, of course, because our GDP is quite high, now higher than any one of these countries. But the value of that IGDP is $2 billion. So it's a significant amount of money. What you'll also see is that we're still scratching the surface when it comes to our IGDP. There are just about 36% of Nigerians that are online today using the internet on a regular basis. When you calculate, if we take just 10% of the spending in Africa's economies, if you take 10% of that economy and move it online, you can generate about $75 billion of GDP. I'll talk a little bit about that later. So we're still scratching the surface, one of the lowest in terms of IGDP in Africa. But when you look at the absolute values, actually much more significant than many of these countries at $2 billion. And that is because there are still a number of things that are constraining our ability to increase our IGDP. And I think that as Bayelsa State and other states follow, we can actually begin to increase this IGDP when we remove the bottlenecks and the constraints, primarily infrastructure and skills, to beginning to have a strong IGDP. Next slide, please. Now, this begins to show you the market opportunity that we're sitting on today when it comes to e-commerce. And remember, e-commerce is just one subsector in this very large ICT subsector. This is, in 2012, when you looked at all the e-commerce companies in Nigeria today, we're doing about 1,000 orders a day. About $100 was the average purchase size of a basket. In 2014, just within 2 years, it moved to 15,000 orders per day and $100 average basket. And so the average market size was about $550 million. And some of the names that you see there are names that are becoming household names. Konga, Jumia, Wakanow. You know, Wakanow, Timi talked about online travel agents. Wakanow, as an online travel agent, is actually the biggest travel agent in Nigeria today, whether physical or online. It's the largest. So it just begins to show you. And here we are with only 36 million Nigerians, 36% of Nigerians that are actually accessing the internet on a regular basis. So the potential market opportunity that we see is a market of about $10 billion. Now, the rest of the world has woken up to this opportunity. Today, there has been, up to date, there has been $200 million of foreign direct investment into these companies from outside Nigeria, very little from inside Nigeria, because people outside Nigeria are waking up or are seeing the opportunities in the e-commerce sector, the ICT sector, faster than we as Nigerians are seeing it. And we need to wake up. And I'm glad that Bayelsa State is actually waking up. So this is the e-commerce opportunity in Nigeria. And as it is with many of these business cases we do, we always underestimate. So even when we talk about $10 billion, I'm fairly sure that the size of the market is significantly more than this if we can get all those constraints and bottlenecks out of the way. And I say that because we base these business cases on some of the statistics that we have. And we have statistics that show, next slide please, we have statistics that show that we have a very fragmented retail sector. There are very few malls, there are very few established nationwide retail chains. We talk about the average income of Nigerians, most of them being less than $2 a day. But we sometimes always forget that underlying informal economy. And that informal economy says that the low salaries that we see actually mask the other means of income of many Nigerians and how their disposable income is growing day by day. And once you have greater disposable income, you have a much bigger market for e-commerce. This is the e-commerce, next slide please. This is the e-commerce ecosystem. And I'm doing this because I want your Excellency, I want you to see where you can actually begin to intervene as a state and where the Ministry of Communication Technology from the federal government side can begin to work with you to catalyze the opportunities in e-commerce. So you've got basically 6 components of this ecosystem or this value chain. Infrastructure is basically the connectivity, the software companies that build the platforms, the websites that you transact your e-commerce business on. Products and services are the things that are sold on these platforms. Payment is how you pay for these services online in a digital manner. the warehouse and the logistics, even though you buy the goods online, they've got to be delivered. These are physical goods that must be delivered to a particular address in a particular location. And of course, how do you take it from the warehouse once it's ordered? How do you deliver to what we call the very last mile, that person's physical address? And the thing about it is that technology actually impacts every single sector of this value chain or this ecosystem. And again,